This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, this is Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up, Bilal Zuberi, a principal at General Catalyst, a truly international venture capital firm with offices in Boston, Silicon Valley, and New York. Next up, we hear from Keith Cole, the CEO of Titralyte, this new company offering this tremendous technology for water-based testing at the well site, quicker and cheaper. All that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Bilal Zuberi, a principal at General Catalyst. Bilal, great to have you on the program.
Nice to see you again.
So tell us about General Catalyst.
General Catalyst is a diversified venture capital private equity firm. In aggregate, we manage roughly $2.5 to $3 billion based out of Boston and San Francisco. You know, our investments range from IT, consumer internet, enterprise software, things that you and I use, kayak.com, airbnb.com, maybe your children use it, to mobile apps, but also energy, medical devices, health tech, and robotics. So pretty broad portfolio.
Well, and a global
And a global portfolio, yeah. So our offices are in Boston, New York, and San Francisco, but our investments span all over the U.S., you know, lots of investments in Midwest, lots of investments in South. But also in India, in Iceland, Brazil, China. It's a global world.
Tell us about some of your work in India or China.
Yeah, so China, we invested in what is now the YouTube of China. So yes, we were early there. And it's a big IPO company now, so it's a public company. And in India, it was a company that actually I was a part of the founding team that started it. And it's the largest pure play solar developer in India.
What's the name of it?
It's called Sunborn Technologies.
Sunborn.
And they're doing utility scale solar plants all over India at this point.
Incredible. Certainly a nation that needs some additional power capacity.
Absolutely. You know, their growth is entirely determined by their access to power. You know, you sit there in an office and literally every 30, 45 minutes you will see power trip. It's hilarious how bad the situation is. But fortunately, the government has realized that, and they've stepped up, and the private sector has stepped up to make sure that, you know, the growth of the economy is not stunted.
Outside of solar, where are some of your other energy investments?
So, you know, we have a pretty broad portfolio. We have, solar upstream, solar downstream investments. We have a couple of biofuel companies, you know, some early stage, some now that are, obviously producing biofuels. We have companies that are doing wind blades, large segmented wind blades called modular wind energy as an example. We have companies doing utility scale energy storage, Sustainx, using compressed air. We like things big. You know, I mean, energy is not only a global market. It's, you know, you got to do things at scale. We have companies that are doing LEDs, power transformers. We have an energy efficiency company, actually right out of Austin, that's servicing 25 states, 40 utilities.
What's the name?
It's called Clear Result.
Sure.
It employs 800 people or so.
Incredible. Well, for such a diverse investment group, how do you narrow down what it is that you select?
So we have a matrix approach, right? And the two things that matter on these axes, one is the team and the other is the thematic space. And at any given time, the two are very dependent on each other, right? Before you and I can figure out what themes are of interest, you know, the young, exciting entrepreneurs figure out where the opportunities are. So we kind of follow them. But thematically, you know, we're very interested in large industries that really haven't seen technology move them too much, but they're starting to learn about it. In terms of people, I always refer to, this is the second cycle of clean tech since the last 2 years. The first cycle ended in 2008.
Yep.
In that cycle, I was an entrepreneur. You were in the government helping that cycle happen. I think there are lessons that we learned, and I think we're doing things a bit differently now. The next generation of clean tech entrepreneurs we're seeing, they have, they're sober. They have deep technical backgrounds. They understand the space well. They know that this is the long run. This is going to be 8-10 years before you build a big company.
Sure.
And at the same time, they're hustlers. They're not sitting back and waiting for the customers to come to them. And if the customer is in China or Indonesia or Africa, they're flying out there and finding them.
Well, and how do you find that these entrepreneurs get your attention?
The most important thing that these entrepreneurs can do to get my attention is to tell me about their customer experience. Right? I want these entrepreneurs, even if it's just a paper plan right now, to be talking to customers. I don't want to be the one calling up BP or Shell or whoever to figure out, is this thing useful to you? Tell me that you've spoken to them and tell me who you've spoken to and who I should talk to. That catches my attention any day. That's the mistake I made as an entrepreneur. I thought if I build a widget, everybody will come and want to buy it. That's not how it works.
To me, what's unique about the successful investors I know, they've not only been on the investor side, but they've been on the entrepreneur side of the equation. I take it General Catalyst as a firm values that.
Not only do we value that, our motto, if you look at our website, it's General Catalyst Partners, Entrepreneurs, Investing in Entrepreneurs. So every single one of us, have built companies, sold companies, taken companies public. We've been in situations where we've had to hire people, we've had to fire people, we've had to figure out how do you make payroll, where we've had to figure out strategy doesn't work, how do you pivot into something different. Yeah. Technology reaches dead end sometimes, and then you have to find alternate ways of doing the same things. So you create a certain sense of empathy with the process. You create a certain sense of respect for the entrepreneur. You don't look at them as successes and failures. You look at them as people who are growing up and maturing and building companies. And you have a healthy dose of reality about, there's no easy markets. There's no quick flips here.
I assume that makes you just a better partner.
We do a large percentage of what we do is invest in the companies either at inception or at the very, very early stages. So we go in and we take a significant chunk of equity, 20%, 25%, 30% type ownership in the company. But then us and the entrepreneurs are on the same side of the table. All along from there onwards to the 10 years later when this company might file for an IPO, we're completely aligned in our objectives.
As you look at some of the exciting trends coming up in the energy space, are there certain areas that you're watching?
Definitely. Obviously, over the last few years, what is going on in the natural gas space has turned the landscape upside down. Right? It's amazing. If you think about it, this is not just a natural resource available. There's some amazing technology that's getting deployed to make this happen. People have known about unconventional sources for a long time. We just didn't know how to get it out. So there's a lot of technology that's being developed to produce that more effectively and economically. Agriculture, as I mentioned, is a big space. It's amazing. There are countries in the world that have been using drip irrigation for like 80 years. And we're just now starting.
Right.
It's amazing when you think about that. But I think, that's just, the beginning of, I think, a lot of technology penetrating our farms. Another space I'm interested in is safety security. Whether it's food safety, food security, or our infrastructure, energy infrastructure included. Lots of amazing technologies that have been developed, some in this country, some outside this country, that have never been deployed. We all want natural foods. We want local organic produce. Think about it. That lasts like 3 days.
Yeah.
We used to fruit that lasts like a month.
That's right.
So when I travel internationally, it's amazing that you buy milk and it goes bad in 3 days, and I'm cursing at it, realizing that's probably good for me.
Right.
So we're looking at technologies that can take organic local produce, maintain all its nutrients and everything, but make sure that it lasts longer.
Well, Bilal, thank you for coming by and visiting with us today.
Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. And that wraps our discussion with Bilal Zuberi. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Keith Cole, CEO of Titralyte. Keith, great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about Titralyte.
So we have game-changing technology that uses supramolecular chemistry to give you lab-quality results in the field in a matter of minutes without a lab. And as you know, hydraulic fracturing uses millions of gallons of water on every single well.
Sure.
And because of that, there's a huge pressure on the industry to get that right, to make sure that they're not contaminating our water supply that we drink every day. So using this technology, you can not only optimize your frac, you can also make sure that you're not contaminating the water table. And if you did, you can easily find out and remedy that problem.
Well, and it's a big opportunity as we hear more and more about increased regulation from the EPA and some of these state agencies.
Yes, the EPA is looking to regulate a lot of things these days, and for good reason. All the operators and all the companies are probably not as environmentally sensitive as they should be, and so those regulations exist for a good reason. But our technology will allow the companies that are doing it well to demonstrate very quickly, we're in compliance with those regulations, we're not a problem for you. And those who aren't, of course, the EPA or the relevant state body will do the same thing and enforce those regulations and make sure people are behaving.
Well, tell us about the technology.
So essentially, we use supramolecular chemistry to create a molecular bond with the contaminant in the water that you need to discover what it is. That allows you to actually now take your water quality and match it to the chemistry you're using to frack the well. And by doing that, you get increased production as well as use fewer chemicals. So not only is there a cost savings from using less chemicals, but an environmental savings as well, because you're not adding more chemistry to the water that eventually goes down the hole somewhere into the earth.
When I talk to my friends that own the wells, they say, look, tons of water technologies, right? Lots of companies coming up with a new pitch. How is yours different? How is yours better?
So all the companies that are attacking the water market are trying to treat the water. We don't treat it, we test it. Again, testing it so you can actually optimize your chemistry to fit the well as make sure that when you take that water out, it's environmentally safe and it can be injected downhole or put into a stream even if you treated it enough.
And it's cost effective today?
Absolutely cost effective today. We are cheaper than the total cost that they spend to do what they're doing today. They use laboratories, they use on-site chemistry kits. These are actually error prone. You wouldn't think a lab has a lot of mistakes, but they do. People make mistakes. And so the water also, when you transport it from the well site to the lab, it takes days to transport it, and that water actually changes on you during that process. So even though you tested it in a laboratory, you're testing a stale sample of water. On site, right then and there, you get an accurate result down to parts per million concentration, and you get it right at the point when the water is the freshest.
And who then are your target customers?
We service all of it, but there's probably two primary ones, the oilfield service companies and more of the active operators. Some of the operators actually take more management over their water systems. And then the water treatment companies that you mentioned earlier. So the people trying to treat the water need to use our technology so they can figure out what's in the water, how am I going to clean that water, and then once they've done it, they need to show not only maybe some regulatory body, but show their customer, we actually did what we said we would do.
Well, I would think certainly now with all of this domestic production of fossil fuels, that now is a great time. What challenges are you facing as we round out 2012 and get into 2013?
I mean, our biggest challenge is not being able to move fast enough. We're a startup, so we are developing technologies one by one, detecting borate, calcium, strontium, magnesium. All these things take a little bit of time. So our customers want it out today.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we said, look, we've got a product we can give you today, and we'll add to it as we have the technologies developed, and they love that.
And so what will the company look like by the end of 2013?
We'll have a full selection of things that you can detect in the water. We call those analytes. So it could be calcium, magnesium, strontium, iron, arsenic, hydrogen sulfide, sulfate. All the things, if you're in the industry, you know are problems. And we'll have all that detection capability all over the country by the end of next year.
Well, Keith, it sounds exciting. Thank you so much for taking some time with us. And that wraps this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.